Hey there, this is Dave from The Greg and Dave Show. Thank you for listening to the following broadcast here on Public House Media.
This is Baxter Colburn, host of the Verse of the Day podcast on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Verse of the Day. In Verse of the Day, we talk about practical examples on how each verse in the Bible can be applied to our daily lives and draw us a little bit closer to all that God has to offer. A new show comes out every single day, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Verse of the Day podcast. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Hit hard, run fast, and most importantly, always turn left. Welcome to Completely Serious. That little number was sent to us by Mike Stout. Thank you, Mike, for that piece of advice. If you're playing baseball in a mirror or on a backwards day, I guess you may want to run right. But anyways, welcome to Completely Serious on Public House Media. I'm your host, Ryan Piers, but you didn't turn on this podcast on iTunes or Spreaker or whatever source you may be using because of me. You saw the name of our exciting guest and said, oh yeah, that's my guy. And we'll get to him in a second, but first, thanks for listening to episode 29. We have reached the end of our roaring 20s and have also reached the end of April, already approaching May, and there's no debating that. It's a scientific fact that May is almost here. April showers or snowstorms have passed, and now May mud is upon us. And thank you, loyal listener. I would like to give you each a gift for sticking with us, which I will tell you about at some point in this podcast. I will do it without warning. You will not see it coming. I will tell you about a gift in some point in this podcast. Anyways, but you are going to have to wait and see. Anyways, I have a fun guest, maybe my favorite so far in the podcast, part of the Public House Media family, Christian Heimall. He hosts a great, dare I say, the premier podcast for hot takes and sports talk called The Cheap Seats on Public House Media, along with Jonathan Lauder. I actually had the distinct privilege to co-host the show this week, and now Christian is doing me the kindness of joining me on my podcast. Christian, thanks for hopping on Completely Serious. Give me the elevator pitch, the book cover description, the Tinder profile bio. Tell the listeners what your podcast is about.
Yeah, so, The Cheap Seats is a 3-day-a-week podcast where basically we combine three different pairings of hosts, and the idea is to just get a fun, friendly debate. The idea is, it's called The Cheap Seats for a reason. There's no better place for sports arguments than way up in the bleachers where you've had a couple of brews in you and you're just kind of spitting whatever comes out of your head and just kind of putting your ideas out there. We'll tackle some of the hot sports, but we'll also do some kind of goofy, fun things. A couple weeks ago, we had a sports video game draft, that kind of got people going up in arms a little bit there. But so, yeah, that's kind of the idea. It's just a couple of guys who've had a few beers up in the bleachers and are tired of watching the game they're watching, so they talk whatever they would feel like.
Can you remind us who the number one pick was in that sports video game draft?
Number one pick was backyard baseball, to be honest. You cannot take Pablo Sanchez number one. You can't do it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So that's a good one. I would guess Madden football was probably up there too.
So we had Madden 2006, the specific 2006, the first year of the truck stick. So yeah, we had a couple of ones in there. We had some people mad that we didn't have MVP Baseball 05 in there, which they thought was one of the better baseball games. We had some people mad that Wayne Gretzky's 3D hockey wasn't included. So it's always that kind of fun stuff.
What's your favorite topic or maybe your favorite sport to talk about on your show? Is there one that always gets it going?
Between the Cheap Seats and Press Row, I think the number one, my favorite one to really talk about is college basketball. Don't get me wrong, I love baseball. Baseball is my all-time favorite sport, but it becomes a little bit too exhausting to talk at because the season is so long and because there's so many people to talk about, and not many people really care if you're talking about a guy hitting a curveball or not, or a guy being able to pitch 7 innings. But college basketball is so much fun. There's so much passion behind it, from alums to fans to players. College basketball is just so much fun to talk about, and that's easily got to be my favorite one to discuss.
Would have you give a hot take on college sports, college basketball in general, a little later on in the podcast. Baseball-wise, though, what a crazy April it's been with all the snow outs and some teams that you didn't think would be good have been really well. How much stock are you putting into performances for MLB teams in April, considering it's such a long season and considering the weather we've had so far this year?
Well, I think when it comes down to it for baseball, April was a good litmus test. I mean, I can remember there were a few years back where the Baltimore Orioles were in first place from opening day until about June, and then all of a sudden they fell off the face of the planet and weren't even a contender in the postseason for the playoffs. So it's a good litmus test where you can kind of see, hey, are these guys really the real deal? Are they going to stick around, or are they, like, for instance, Pittsburgh? I mean, the Pittsburgh Pirates are playing so well right now. Same with the Philadelphia Phillies, and I think the addition of Jake Arrieta certainly helped them.
Yeah.
But they've got so much young talent. Can they realistically keep it up? The Pirates, especially in that Central Division, the Cubs are going to figure it out. The Brewers are better than they were last year, even though they're not playing like it right now. And the Cardinals will eventually get there too. And the NL East, I mean, if the Mets can figure out their rotation and the Nationals can get it together, you're going to see those two teams right now, the Phillies and the Pirates, kind of slip. But at the same time, I mean, last year we said the same thing about the New York Yankees and their young talent, and they won't be able to keep it up the whole way through. And they almost won the division. So, it's a good litmus test, but at the end of the day, it's also ultimately kind of a crapshoot because it is such a long season.
It's such a big weekend for sports. We talked about this on your podcast earlier this week. You have, like you mentioned, so many good baseball matchups this weekend, the tight NBA playoffs, the exciting NHL playoffs, and, of course, the NFL draft. I don't think I have the attention span for that many sports in one weekend, but what are you most looking forward to watching this weekend?
For me, it's going to be the playoffs, honestly. I mean, like, the NFL draft is nice, but honestly, after you get through the first 10 picks, how many people really care anymore? Once your team actually picks, you're kind of over it and done. So I'll be checking in on the draft every now and again to see who my team takes, and see how they kind of figure things out. But other than that, I mean, as much as I love baseball, again, baseball is one of those sports where it's really easy to catch the highlights because most of the time it's, a guy with 3 strikeouts or a home run. So it's really quick highlights, and you got to watch 8 minutes of a game. It's definitely going to be the playoffs. NBA, NHL, the Stanley Cup playoffs are the best playoffs there are. I mean, the home atmosphere is great. And then when you've got, for instance, this weekend, you're going to have the Cavaliers trying to close out Indiana. You're going to have the potential start of the semifinals, the Rockets moving on. You're going to have the Warriors and the Pelicans, which is going to be fun to watch. So, and then you've got the start after a tremendous Game 7 on Wednesday night. You're going to have so many exciting NHL playoff series starting, which, in my opinion, still has the best story in sports in the Vegas Golden Knights.
I'm going to give you a bunch of scenarios from this weekend, some possible scenarios, and I want you to tell me which one is more likely. So I'll give you scenarios, tell me which one is more likely, then a blurb as to why. The first scenario, going cross sports here, involves the city of Cleveland. What is more likely? Scenario 1, the Indiana Pacers beat the Cleveland Cavaliers, or the Cleveland Browns draft Saquon Barkley. So the Pacers beating the Cavs, who are now Pacers now trail the series 2-3, or the Cleveland Browns drafting Saquon Barkley.
I'm going to go, because I really don't think, everything I've been hearing says the Browns aren't taking Saquon Barkley. So but
they both
that's tough. I'm going to, it's strange. It's both of them are unlikely, honestly, right now, but at the same time, the NFL draft has such a cloud around it because a lot of it could be teams saying things that they don't really believe to try to get trade value, to try whatever it may be. So I'm going to go Browns take Barkley on that one.
Okay, I think that's a possibility too, but you're right. So much could happen. Scenario 2, Sidney Crosby dominates Alex Ovechkin as the Capitals take on the Penguins, or Kevin Durant dominates Anthony Davis in a matchup between the Pelicans and the Golden State Warriors.
I'm going to go Crosby.
Okay.
That one's actually a little bit easy for me to take, personally. I think Crosby is, and I have this debate with so many people, I think Crosby is far and away better than Alex Ovechkin right now from a career standpoint. And then when you look at the way that Crosby is playing currently, the way he played in that first series, I've never seen a player step up all of a sudden out of nowhere in the playoffs like this in hockey. That being said, the other thing is I think Anthony Davis is that much better defensively and so much more of a physical presence. And the biggest the biggest knock you can make on Kevin Durant is that as soon as you body him up and actually play him physically on defense, he starts to fold a little bit. He defers a lot. So I think Anthony Davis will do that tremendously. And I don't know if he dominates him, but I certainly think he overpowers him.
Which will last longer, an average baseball game from this weekend or the first 10 picks in the NFL draft? Which one of those lasts longer?
Definitely a baseball game. I mean, it's been the biggest issue that the sport has had is how long the games go. I mean, you're averaging close to 3 hours and 20 minutes now when just 10 years ago it was under 3 hours. So, I mean, I definitely think that's the one that's going to end up lasting longer. The first 10 picks, by rule, they can't last longer than an hour and 50 minutes. Okay. So, so I think that ends up what's going to end up happening there is baseball definitely goes longer.
That's a good point. Actually, I've had this talk on this podcast before. Baseball's changed to where the teams and the players are smarter, the hitters are smarter, and they're taking more pitches. And I think that's the big reason we're seeing these games last longer. So you can do whatever you want to do to try to speed it up, but if hitters are going to take more pitches, we're going to see long games. Is there anything, in your opinion, they can do outside of putting a clock on the game to speed these things up?
Here's where I think the biggest issue is, and I agree with you. I think the game has become so much more cerebral than it ever was. To the point where you have these, lefty-righty pitching matchups, which is why I like the institution of mound visits. I like that it's been limited this year. And I think it is helping a little bit because now you're not having guys go out to stall for the left-hander to come in for one batter just to bring in another guy. Where I think baseball can really help itself, and we kind of saw this during football season, and we've seen it in the NBA actually. Number one is if you look at what they did in the NFL, randomly, like during a play clock, during a huddle, you'll see a quick 30-second commercial. And you never actually went to break. You just saw the 30-second commercial while you still saw the game. Yeah. That's something that I think should be done during telecast. It comes down to sponsors, in my opinion. That's the biggest issue because there's so much money put into ad revenue that, we need these 30 seconds. We need this minute-long ad. And if you can convince these sponsors to say, you know what, spend a little less money on 15-second advertisements. We get it in there between pitches, or we get it in there, as the guy's walking to first base after a hit by pitch, and we throw it in there. It speeds up the game a little bit because now we don't have to take a break for those 30 seconds and then come back, and that can shorten up the inning breaks. The other thing is take some of those sponsors and put them on the jersey. I'm not saying go full NASCAR here, but look at what the NBA has done. If you watch the NBA now, they did this 2 years ago. They started putting a little sponsor on the upper left chest of the jersey, and now you don't even notice it. You really don't even realize that it's there. And I think if you start doing that with Major League Baseball, you start putting those tiny little patches somewhere on the jersey. I know people are going to get upset, especially Yankee fans. You can't do that to the pinstripes. But you know what? It takes a 1-minute commercial off of the airwaves that we have to go to break for, and it speeds up the game. It may not be 100% noticeable. It may not be a drastic 15 minutes come off a game, but it will at least be noticeable.
Yeah, that's such an innovative way to do things, too, and it's actually worked out pretty well for the NBA. That's a good point. Last one here. Which one of these sports wins the ratings battle? Any of the four, NHL, NBA, NFL, or MLB this weekend? Who wins the ratings battle with at least three of those four in pretty big scenario situations for their leagues?
Yeah, I mean, outside of Thursday night, the NFL is not going to have much of a ratings boost. So I'm going to go NBA just because our country has become so infatuated with the playoffs and the hatred of LeBron James, the hatred of the Golden State Warriors. So I think that will easily win the ratings because as much as hockey is as popular as hockey is, especially come the playoffs, it still is somewhat a niche sport to the majority of Americans. They would rather watch a basketball game that is a 30-point blowout as opposed to a Game 7 like we saw on Wednesday night. I know the Bruins scored 4 goals and made it a laugher in the third period, but you had more people watching a 25-point comeback by the Thunder over Utah than you did watching Game 7 in a do-or-die format. So that's where I think you'll see is the NBA, because of our society, because of our culture, how much they love the sport, you will see the NBA dominate the ratings.
Christian, your show is full of hot takes, and I think you're going to do well in this last segment I have for you. We're going to play a game called Can't Do It. Here's how it works. I give you a controversial sports topic, and you just need to give me your opinion. If you don't want to give your opinion, because it's so controversial, although I think these three you'll do just fine with, you can say pass by saying can't do it. And your punishment is you must tell me your most embarrassing sports moment from your career. But if you answer the question, you're good. But if you don't want to answer, that's fine. You just say can't do it, and then as punishment, you give me that embarrassing sports moment. I think you'll be okay. Your first question, we're going to alienate some people here, and we've talked about it a little bit. There's some tension between NBA and NHL fans. Fans for the NBA say nothing beats the heated NBA playoffs, and NHL fans say the March for Lord Stanley's Cup is superior to all, but which one do you prefer? Are you more of an NHL playoff guy or an NBA playoff fan?
Oh, this one's too easy. It's the NHL. It's not even close. I mean, you look at, first off, the atmosphere of – I'm not even going to get to the atmosphere yet. First off, it's the best trophy in sports. It's the Stanley Cup. I mean, for crying out loud, it's the greatest sports trophy there actually is, all due respect to the Lombardi Trophy. But most people don't even know what the NBA championship trophy is called. Most people don't realize it's called the Bill O'Brien Trophy. Like, nobody understands that. Number one. Number two, it's just called the NBA title. Number two is when you look at the actual atmosphere, and I know that some people get really hyped up and these games sell out, but in the NHL, look at Nashville, for crying out loud. Nashville has brought, every single time they have a home game, they bring out a different car or vehicle painted up like their opponent, and they let fans come in and smash it with a sledgehammer. It's phenomenal. They're doing this. They literally brought in a helicopter for their series with the Winnipeg Jets. They brought in a small little single-engine Cessna plane and colored it up like the Jets, and they're letting fans smash a plane, for crying out loud. Like, that's awesome. They throw catfish onto the ice when they signal that a team is basically dead in the water, sleeping with the fishes. Look at what Vegas has done. It's the middle of the freaking desert, and a hockey team is selling out games. Like, the atmosphere is far and away better on the NHL side of things, and it really translates across when you're watching on TV as well. So to me, there is nothing better. And I love baseball. I love it so much, but there's nothing better than the Stanley Cup playoffs.
Very nice. Okay, question number 2, and I think you're going to coast through this one as well. Should we get rid of the one and done in college basketball?
This is a weird one, because if you get rid of the one and done, what do you do? You know, do you go back to the old rule where as long as you're 18 years old, you can enlist. You can say you're going to go to the draft. As long as you're 18, you can do that. Or do you do it in a way that's similar to baseball, where you can be drafted after your senior year of high school and then say no to that draft pick, go to college, but as soon as you go to college, you're not eligible to be drafted until your junior year. There's so many different ways. You know, does a guy signing with an agent mean that he's locked in no matter what? Because here's the weird part about the NBA. There are 2 rounds to the NBA draft. Only the players drafted in the first round are guaranteed a roster spot. Those other 30 guys who get drafted in the second round, they have to go to training camp and make the roster. If they don't make the roster, what do? They don't go to the G League. They're not guaranteed a G League contract either. So unless you're going to guarantee all these kids a professional contract for coming right out of high school and trying to go play in the pros, I don't think you can get rid of the one and done just yet. That being said, you know, I'd love to see them get rid of it personally, because I think it's really nice watching these kids play. I mean, Wendell Carter and Marvin Bagley were a lot of fun to watch for Duke this year, and Zion Williamson should be in the NBA. Yeah. He should be in the NBA next year. He should not be playing at Duke. You know, and I think it makes it more fun when you can sit there and really get attached to some of these players for a couple of years and try to see what they do. That's what makes Villanova so awesome. It's what made Frank Mason so great at at Kansas. So those type of things, when you can actually get attached to players for your college team, it's a lot more fun.
Last question. Should athletes, and I'll take it a step further and say sports pundits, be allowed to talk about politics, or should they have to, quote, stick to sports?
I actually had a whole show a couple of months ago dedicated to this. If you're going to tell me as a sportscaster, or you're going to tell someone like Colin Kaepernick as an athlete who has a platform in the public eye, that they shouldn't do anything to attempt to change the public for their better, for the greater good, then you should tell politicians to don't get involved in steroid investigations, don't get involved in NFL Deflategate. You should tell accountants not to get involved in sports. You should tell accountants not to get involved in politics. It's the dumbest argument in the world. The stick to sports argument is so stupid, because if you're going to tell me to stick to my job and not talk about it, and you're a carpenter and you're going to try to tell me about, the Cleveland Browns should draft Sam Darnold. Really? Well, then here's how you should build this house. So it's one of the dumbest things possible. This is a true fundamental core value that I firmly believe in. We are put here on this planet to make it a better place. The best thing about being a human being is being human. And if that means that you can stand up for what you believe in and try to make a better change, a more positive change on this planet, then do it, no matter what your job title is. Just because you're an athlete, you're a quarterback who is of African-American descent and feels that your culture and your people are being mistreated in this country, you should be allowed to stand up for that. You should be allowed to take a knee for that at the national anthem and bring awareness to it and raise money to help make it better. Same way as you should be allowed to raise money for cancer and put those messages on your shoes, raise money for autism, bring awareness to the fact that our teachers don't get paid anywhere near what they should for what they do. You should be allowed to do that. The most important thing when you have a voice in the public eye is to use it for the betterment of the country. And so absolutely not. You and I are athletes. Anybody else should never be told to stick to sports. It's the dumbest possible thing that could actually be said to somebody, is to stick to your job and not voice their opinion to try to make it better.
Christian Heimall, bringing the heat and inspiration. Nicely said. Hey, before we let you go, thanks for jumping on the podcast. Where can people find all your content, because you do so much?
So you can easily find me on Twitter at Chris Heimall, ChrisHeimall. Like you mentioned, I host the Cheap Seats on Mondays, also produce the Wednesday and Friday shows, so you can check us out, the Cheap Seats by Public House Media on Facebook. And then I have my individual show, Press Row, which airs every Thursday. You can find that Press Row PHM on Twitter as well. But yeah, as always, thphmedia.com is the place to be to check everything out.
Big thanks to Chris Heimall for joining us on Public House Media's Completely Serious, and thank you for sticking with us to the end of this podcast. Chris did a great job, and we really appreciate his info, and we'll have to have him back on again. I want to remind you, and I said I had a gift for those that were listening in the beginning. You stuck with me the entire time. I want to remind you that thphmedia.com thepHmedia.com is the place to get Public House Media merch and swag and whatever you want to call it. It's a lot of fun to wear something nobody else is wearing, right? You're a trendsetter. Well, you can do that by getting some completely serious merch from thepHmedia.com. We've got shirts, sweatshirts, bags, cups, mugs, caps, whatever you may want, socks. It's there. So thepHmedia.com, and here's a gift I want to give you. If you get something from the show Completely Serious or any of our podcasts, and you message me on our Facebook page, the Completely Serious Public House Media Facebook page, I will buy you your own merch from the site for free. So you buy one, get one free via my credit card. But you have to do that, and I will only do that for 3 people if 3 people take me up on this offer. So go to thepHmedia.com, and in 2 weeks we'll have more exciting guests on Completely Serious, brought to you by Public House Media, and we'll talk with you then.